Jay. How are you?
I'm doing good. Any updates or anything I need to be aware of?
Well, we had considered something about minutes, but it wasn't on the agenda, so we decided not to push it.
Well, that's the amendment for the minutes of the January 9th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I talked with Pete about we making a motion for that. I'll bring it up if we will need to move forward.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you think that it'll pass, I mean, want to make sure everybody had a chance to read them and if there were any, discussion. But if it can get passed, that would be wonderful.
Those were the same minutes from before, right?
It should be. I'm not aware of any changes.
Yes, they were the same. Hey,
Hey,
yes, they were the same minutes.
okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I sent them on the 14th, or for the 14th meeting. I just didn't add them as an agenda item, so that was my error.
Just do some push-ups. Push-ups. Floater kick and everything.
Mr. Chair, we should be at 6:30 in probably about 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Is Mr. Toussaint with us today? I see he's logged on.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Someone needs to let me in on this meeting, guys.
You're
I'm
in.
not in.
Susan, what are you?
I don't know what I am. I mean, I'm on Mr. Richard's phone right now.
Is it
Yeah.
iPhone?
It is an iPhone.
I have an iPhone and I have a constant iPhone.
I mean, I don't know how that shows up here.
Can you rename it?
I can't do it until you let me in.
I just have multiple iPhones, so I need to know which one you are.
I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you that because I can't identify myself until I'm in and I see the menu. There. That's
That was
it.
you? Okay.
Karis, can you hear us?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, I'm gonna move this over to where Jim's gonna be sitting.
Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the Henry County Zoning Advisory Board meeting, May the 28th, 2020. This meeting is being held via video conference and is streaming live at henrycounty/ga.org, Facebook, and Spectrum Channel 180 for public viewing. If you wish to participate in the conference, please provide your name, phone number, Zoom user ID, and the case you wish to speak on. Please list if you wish to speak in favor or opposition of a case. A total of 10 minutes will be allowed for anyone wishing to speak in favor of a case, beginning with the applicant, and 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. At this time, I will provide the invocation and a prayer. Excuse me, the invocation and the pledge. Heavenly Father, we come before you thanking you for all your blessings. We ask that you guide us in the decisions that we are making this evening. We ask that you be with us and lead us in the right direction. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting is now called to order. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes with an amendment to accept the January 9th, 2020 minutes?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Can you read that back, Mr. Toussaint? Were you there? If not, I think we had a motion by Mr. Pete and a second by
Don. Was it Don?
Mr. VM.
Mr. Venom.
Yeah.
Mr. Venom, yes.
Yes, Yolanda, tonight cars will be being able to read everything back to you, okay?
Okay, great. All right, Karis. Okay. Okay, staff, do we have any announcements?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I can say is that we don't expect to have any more Zoom meetings. Other than that, no planning staff comments.
Okay, well, if we're not having any more meetings, we'll move forward with this one.
I wasn't even looking. Okay. Okay.
Can we call the first case, please?
Yes, sir. Under variances, BR-20-05, the Reservoir Group LLC of Locust Grove, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 337 East Lake Road in land lots 7 and 8 of the 7th district. The property consists of 41.96 plus or minus acres, and the request is for relief from the Highway Corridor Overlay District standards in District 4, and the staff report is presented by Stacy Jordan Rudisil, Chief Planner. So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would like to share my screen. So bear with me, please. Well, at this moment, the host has disabled screen sharing.
Okay,
So let me just move forward verbally, if I may. So bear with me just a moment. This location, as it's in your exhibit books, is located on East Lake Road, across East Lake Road from the Union Grove Middle School and beside the elementary school and also beside a church. This location came before the board back in 2017 for zoning approval and for conditional use approval for conservation subdivision and for variance at that time from the Highway Corridor Overlay District standards, which would have required a U-shaped configuration, but there was a lake in the way, and so that was approved as well. The request before you tonight is for a waiver from Highway Corridor Overlay District standards for a couple of things. First, to reduce the width of the sidewalk along the internal streets to 4 feet. And also to eliminate the requirement for street trees as well as pedestrian lighting for the internal streets. And so I'd like to say at this time that the applicant's request doesn't have any, it does not include any of these improvements that would be located along East Lake Road itself. This request is simply for the subdivision streets. So staff has evaluated the applicant's request. We have, we've noted several things. Bear with me, please, if you will. Okay. We've noted that the applicant has received variances previously. We've noted that the applicant has received several administrative waivers, which was intended to to allow for the development to be developed in substantial compliance with the intent of the overlay, but to solve logistical issues and other problems that might keep the applicant from being able to move forward. So there were several administrative waivers, one of which was to reduce the width of the internal sidewalks from 8 feet to 5 feet. So that waiver has already been approved administratively. We've noted that if there's a perceived conflict in the zoning code, so for example, if pedestrian lights are required in the highway corridor overlay district, and it is, and if street lights are also required, and they are, and if providing both is a conflict, the code says that the more stringent regulation should apply. And the purpose of the overlay district is to require a higher standard of development. So our interpretation is that the overlay standard is more stringent and should therefore be required over any conflicting ordinance. So we've noted these several things, and we do recommend denial of the applicant's request, but I'd be pleased to answer questions.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff? Mr. Carmichael, Mr. Carmichael, you're muted as well. Can you unmute it?
I tried and it went on mute.
You are. Thank you.
I am now, okay.
Yeah.
Stacy, I have looked at the code in section 4.05, and I have not been able to determine where the code provides for the number of lights, this, or the spacing of lights. What am I missing?
Mr. Carmichael, you are not missing anything. The code does not specify the distance between the lights, and it's simply not in there. So that leaves it up to staff interpretation, and we're quite willing to work with the applicant in that regard. So for example, at first we were saying as long as there is continuous light coverage along the sidewalk, that would be acceptable, and it would be. But if that is going to cause an issue, then perhaps the pedestrian lights could simply be required to be one pedestrian light per lot. That seems acceptable to staff. It's very possible that with the pedestrian lights that are required, that when the lighting study is completed to determine how many street lights, that there should be a reduced number of street lights, if any, because there will already be pedestrian lights illuminating the internal streets. So the ordinance doesn't say, you haven't missed anything, but staff is willing to work with the applicant.
Okay. What is the difference between street lights and pedestrian lights?
Yes, sir. A street light is intended to illuminate the travel lane of the street. And so therefore it's expected to be higher. It's expected to, if you can imagine the cone of light coming down from the fixture, that cone of light is expected to be wider than a pedestrian light would be. And we recognize that the pedestrian lights will illuminate a portion of the travel lane, but its purpose is to illuminate the sidewalk for pedestrians.
Okay. Do the pedestrian lights provide more lighting than street lights?
No, sir.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Carmichael?
Yes, another question. There was an administrative waiver approved in 2019 that indicates, and I'll read it, the electric service provider's standard street light may be used as a pedestrian light meeting the intent of both street light and pedestrian light requirements. Street lights shall be placed in a manner so as to provide full coverage for the sidewalks. A pedestrian street lighting plan and a detail other street light / pedestrian lights shall be provided in the construction plans, meeting the approval of the Building and Plan Review Department. Now, in light of this particular waiver, uh, how does this differ from what the applicant is requesting?
Yes, I understand. So if you can imagine, a pedestrian light is limited in height to 15 feet, whereas a street light may be much higher than that. The code allows for different types of fixtures. It only requires that the lights be painted black, that they be fluted. These are typical acorn lights, if you will, that have a little finial on the top. So that's what we think of as pedestrian lights. The applicant had indicated that they would prefer for the utility provider to provide the fixtures themselves, but the utility provider doesn't provide pedestrian lights. They leave that up to the developer. So the request was, could a street light be counted as a pedestrian light? And so what we wanted to do was to require an equal or maybe a better standard than what the code required. So the administrative waiver, as you read it, allows for a street light to serve as a pedestrian light without reducing the requirement for full coverage. So this was the intent behind the administrative waiver approval. But as far as the difference between the administrative approval and the applicant's request, what I can, and it may be better to ask the applicant, but the applicant's letter of intent indicates that they wish to eliminate the requirement for pedestrian lights, as well as the street trees with the landscape strip, and to reduce the width of the sidewalk from, they said 8, but they have an administrative waiver to allow 5, but they wish to put in 4. So they wish to eliminate the pedestrian light requirement. The administrative waiver doesn't accomplish that. So that's the biggest difference, Mr. Carmichael.
Okay. Are the requirements for the landscape strip and pedestrian lighting, are those normal for residential neighborhoods?
No, that is not typical for your regular run-of-the-mill countywide residential subdivision standard. And that is the entire point of the overlay, which is to require a higher standard to make these residential developments stand out in a very good way by requiring these pedestrian lights and street trees and wider sidewalk standard and so forth. So this is something that is particular to the Highway Corridor Overlay District and is not typical at all of residential subdivisions.
Okay, one final question, Stacy. Now, the requirement for lighting, does that conflict with section 4.01.09, which provides that lighting in all of the districts shall be established in such a way that they did not, established in such a way that no direct light is cast upon or adversely affect adjacent properties?
And I'm not that familiar with section 401.11, I believe you mentioned, Mr. Carmichael. It sounds like that is intended to prohibit light pollution. So if someone has a security light or what have you, that it will not, there won't be light pollution onto a neighbor's property. These lights are intended to go in the public right of way and to meet a public right of way standard. I can tell you that if we as staff were to come to the understanding that there would be light shining in a place where it shouldn't, there are shields that could be placed upon these fixtures to mitigate that situation. So my interpretation is no. The requirement for lights in the right of way would not be a conflict with the code section that you had referenced.
Okay. Now, do we typically, as a board, deny such requests, this type of request, when it does not conform to the standards in the overlay district?
Well, the overlay district has been in place for a number of years. It was in the spring of 2017 when it was adopted. And this is one of the first residential subdivisions that has come forward for development. So we don't have a long track record. I can say that when this property came before the board previously, that the request for variance for the street alignment was approved. So there have been some that have been approved. It's typical for this board to deny requests based upon staff recommendation, but we don't have a long track record in the overlay.
Okay, and this is my final question. In view of the fact that the utilities in this area would have to be underground, and I guess in a normal residential section area, you would have a width, sidewalk width of maybe what, 4 feet rather than 5 feet? Why wouldn't we go with the 4 feet?
Right. The overlay district is meant to require a higher standard.
Yeah.
And that is the gist of the whole thing, that we want these developments within the overlay to be special, to be basically to meet a higher standard. So as far as the utilities go, there's a typical utility standard. That typical utility standard would not be able to be used because of these improvements within the right of way, namely the street trees and the pedestrian lights and the wider width sidewalks and so forth. So, but Mr. Carmichael, this is one of the reasons why we have pre-construction meetings and we've got pre-review meetings and so forth, so that we can get the players to the table at the same time and work out these new things and some unique things that will come up in the midst of development.
Okay, thank you, Stacey.
Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard, you're actually muted at this point. Can you unmute? Okay,
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Uh, Are you saying that the typical utility section or roadway section that's in the ULDC, that if the sidewalks were 5 feet in this subdivision, that the typical section would not fit or not apply? So in other words, there would have to be that the underground utilities would have to be moved further towards the house, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, sir, that is correct. The typical street section does not anticipate street trees or pedestrian lights or a wider width sidewalk. So there may have to be some other mitigating factor, such as a wider utility easement or what have you. And staff is quite willing to work with the applicant as far as placing landscape strips, perhaps on the backside of sidewalks and so forth. So we'll do what we can. We certainly want to work with the applicant, but that typical street section is not going to work for developments within the overlay district.
What is the setback for the homes in this conservation subdivision?
Bear with me, Mr. Risher. I seem to recall that it's 50 feet, and I'm going to look, and if it's different, then I will certainly correct myself. But my understanding is that it's 50.
Stacy, according to Mr. Moore, just looking at him, he's indicating that it's 25.
I've got the code with me, and
Okay.
I'll confirm that as soon as I have it.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, I'd like to know that. Thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay.
What my concern is that if in fact if it is a 25-foot setback, and then we have the underground utilities pushed back further, and the sidewalk is wider, would we have an off-street parking situation where we'd have car bumpers hanging out over the sidewalks like we unfortunately see in some subdivisions?
Mr. Risher, what I can confirm is that a conservation subdivision utilizing public sewer services, the front yard setback is 25 feet. We do not
Okay.
anticipate a situation where people cannot fit 2 cars on a single family lot. So for example, the cars, 2 parking spaces are required for a single family lot. And if the utility easement extends further than typical into a lot, these are underground utilities. So where it crosses the driveway, it wouldn't prohibit someone from crossing or parking on private property in their driveway.
Okay. Any
Okay.
additional questions
No,
for,
thank you.
Yeah,
any
one-
additional questions for staff?
One last question.
Okay.
Would the applicant be required to obtain an easement from homeowners to put in the utilities if it would encroach on the driveways?
It is typical for there to be a utility easement on private property running along the public right of way. So the short answer is yes. The lots and the configuration and the final plat approval will happen before these lots are conveyed. So to answer your question, yes, there may be a utility easement on the private lots, but that would be in place before the homeowners purchase the lots.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff? Okay, if not, we'd like to ask the applicant to come forward and we have 10 minutes to present this case and speak in favor of the case as well. So there's a total of 10 minutes that's actually allotted to present it and speak in favor of the case.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good evening. My name is Steve Moore with Moore Bass Consulting, 1350 Keys Ferry Court, McDonough, Georgia, representing the Reservoir Group in this variance request. And I'm going to share my screen and hopefully blow through this. And I know this is confusing, and I'm going to do my best to walk you through what I think we're trying to accomplish here. So this is a picture of the subdivision in its current design. I think everybody knows generally where we are, across the street from Union Grove Middle School on East Lake Road. And as Mr. Risher indicated earlier, this was a conservation subdivision approval that was granted back in 2018. And since then, we've been just dealing with some of these challenges. Otherwise, this project would be well under construction by now. But I just wanted to just refresh your memory on the conservation subdivision and why it's important. But it is to provide preservation of green space, to minimize the development footprint that goes on a property, and specifically to reduce the amount of infrastructure, including paved surfaces, utility easements necessary for residential development. So I just think that's a key feature of this whole project. We've talked a lot about the sidewalk requirements. This is just a statement from the ULDC. And I believe these three right here are primarily what we're kind of talking about and what we think has an effect on our project. So, so the code requires in its form, without any variances, a 10-foot sidewalk and a 10-foot landscape strip and pedestrian lighting along East Lake Road. As Stacy mentioned, we did get an administrative waiver to reduce that sidewalk width from 10 feet to 8 feet, but still a 10-foot landscape strip. The ordinance also requires an 8-foot sidewalk and an 8-foot landscape strip and pedestrian lighting along internal streets. And we did get a waiver to reduce the sidewalk width to 5 feet and to move the landscape strip outside of the right of way. But our request, and I'll explain a little bit later here, our request is just to eliminate that requirement from internal streets. This ordinance got a lot of twists and turns in it, and you don't really understand the consequences of each of those requirements until you get into the detailed design, which we are. And as Stacy mentioned earlier, this is the first subdivision that has, I guess, that is going through this process that's in the highway corridor, and I guess the first one that's a conservation subdivision as well. So a lot of challenges, but it really takes peeling off the layers until you can really understand the effects that it has on a residential development. Clear on commercial developments makes sense. Residential gets a little more complex. That's why we have so many variances requested with the rezoning, because we just couldn't make this subdivision work under the letter of that ordinance. So again, to reiterate, the two administrative waivers that we got related to the sidewalks was the reduction of, or the relocation of the 8-foot strip outside of the right of way. And then that 8-foot strip is going to have the trees and the pedestrian lights, and then the sidewalk through number 7 would be reduced from 8 foot to 5 foot, but the landscape strip would remain at 8 feet wide. So this is a section that shows kind of what you were talking about, Mr. Risher, with the concern about pushing this thing closer to the house. So this is your typical 13-foot to back curb, and then the 2-foot grass strip that you have from the back of curb, and the 5-foot sidewalk. Well, then you've got 5 feet to the right of way line, which is this vertical line here. And then the typical section of the county already requires an additional 5-foot utility easement, which is here. Then we're talking about moving the 8-foot landscape strip on the other side of the easement, which leaves 12 feet of front yard essentially for whatever activities happen in the front yard. It certainly, would limit and minimize the amount of front yard someone could have. So that's just hopefully kind of demonstrates one of the concerns that we have, one of the challenges we have, even with the administrative waivers we've already got. It wasn't until after we got them and you start designing it that you realize, gosh, this really still creates a lot of complexities. So the 8-foot minimum width that's required along the outside of the curb, as is written in the ULDC, Administrative Waiver 5 addresses that, which moves it outside of the road, which we have to do because it conflicts with utilities, as you discussed earlier. Waiver number 5 requires the pedestrian lights to be in the landscape strip, but it pushes the landscape strip 15, or the pedestrian lights 15 feet from the sidewalk. So that just means a bigger light to illuminate, to provide that, to meet the requirement of this continuous coverage. So just another challenge. Again, didn't realize it till you get into it. You're going, this might not work. This is the county's typical utility placement. And all I just wanted to show, this is as per the ULDC. And it just shows you the utilities that conflict with the ordinance as it's written. And there is no substitute in the ULDC that addresses this. And that's a problem, I'm just going to say, that needs to be addressed. And it's not just a matter of a couple of guys getting together and working it out. It involves a lot of people. AT&T, Charter, Henry County Water, Stormwater, DOT. It is a big group of people, and it is going to be a challenge to get that done. Regardless of this, that needs to get addressed, and because I just know how long it takes to get stuff like that through. So that's kind of one item related to the sidewalks. Pedestrian lights. Can you tell me how much time I've got?
You have about 4 minutes now.
Okay. Pedestrian lighting is the second kind of section of this this issue. So this is straight out of the ordinance, out of the highway corridor overlay, section G, and I highlighted the sections or underlined the sections I think are applicable. Lighting shall be designed to prevent light spillover on adjacent properties. Mr. Carmichael, this is similar to what you were talking about earlier. All lighting fully shielded, recessed. So, but that first section of that, to prevent spillover on adjacent properties. This section here is placed in such a manner that full coverage is provided, consistent with what we've already talked about. This is a map that shows the light placement from Snapping Shoals EMC, who is our utility provider, our only choice of utility provider. We don't reach the level where we can go bid it out to other key people. We're stuck with these guys. So this is what they've said you need to meet just the streetlight requirements. So we went to them and we said, well, since you guys don't have a pedestrian light, can we use your streetlights to supplement to provide the continuous coverage? They said, sure, here's what that looks like. So you can just see the difference. We go from, this is what a typical Henry County subdivision is, to that. So significant light coverage. Hard to imagine that we're not going to cast light on adjacent properties, because technically the adjacent property is going to be every lot owner in the subdivision. So again, back to those first two things, lighting to be designed to prevent spillover on adjacent properties. They don't care. EMC doesn't have pedestrian lights. Their only option is additional street lights to be used as pedestrian lights to comply with that pedestrian, with that section D, which requires lights to be spaced to provide full coverage. With this many street lights, it will be a challenge to comply with requirement A, which is not to provide spillover on adjacent properties. So we did get administrative waivers for that we already talked about that said that we could use the utility provider's street lights as pedestrian lights. But, and then just in summary, our request is just because it's so complex and because there's so many intertwined ordinances that conflict with the county's utility placement guides, and we just don't want to get caught in a whole new set of utility placement guidelines and ordinances that ties the overlay district to residential development. We think it's easiest to just eliminate that requirement internal to the subdivision. It would keep in harmony with the conservation approval that we already have. In lieu of the 8-foot sidewalks, we did say 4 foot. I don't know that I actually said 4 foot, Stacy, in our letter of intent. We just said to eliminate the requirements of, which would default you to a 4-foot sidewalk. We would be willing to go to a 5-foot sidewalk internally, but I'm afraid of the conflict with utilities. And again, I know how long that takes to get utility companies together to approve a new section. So we just thought it would be best to just eliminate it completely. We think that the approval of the variances would allow us to proceed in accordance with the adopted county construction standards, that it would minimize unnecessary light pollution, which I do believe this thing's going to look like Wrigley Field when it's lit up at night. And I don't think anybody wants to live in a subdivision like that where you have to close the blinds and get blackout shades just to go to sleep at night.
Okay, Mr.
And
Moore.
to reduce impervious areas. So
Mr.
thank
Moore,
you.
that's going to be 10 minutes there. Now, does the board have questions for the applicant?
I have one question.
Okay.
Steve, have you tried to reach an accommodation with the planning and zoning department?
We have, and we've worked in earnest with them on all the administrative waivers. I think it's testament to that we have worked hand in hand with that, trying to, again, as we peel back the layers and realize what effect this has on something else, and then we request another change, and I think we've worked very well together up until the point where we just really felt like we had no choice but to just eliminate these requirements because it's just too complex and there's too many people involved to be able to make this successful.
Okay.
Are you willing to reduce the amount of lighting in that area? And if so, to what extent?
Our request would be just to reduce down to just the street light requirements that every other subdivision, every new subdivision has, which would be that first slide that I'd shown with the yellow circles.
Okay.
And
Any additional questions? Okay, Mr. Moore, I have a question for you now. You indicated that you had received an administrative waiver for the lights, correct?
We received an administrative waiver, a couple of them relative to the lights.
Okay, now does that reduce you down to the street lights or not?
It allows us to use street lights, the actual street light pole as a pedestrian light, but it doesn't minimize the number. It basically just says you can use the same pole, but you have to add twice as many to provide the continuous coverage over the sidewalk.
Okay, so if we went with just the regular residential lights, how could you move forward at that point?
Our problem is the EMC, who's our utility provider, does not have residential. Oh, you're talking about just residential street lights?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If we could just, but to eliminate that continuous coverage on the sidewalk issue, because that's what's causing basically doubling the number of lights.
Okay, I understand. However, you would be able to move forward with the sidewalk and everything else, correct?
With the sidewalk as is approved in the administrative waiver?
With the 5 foot? With the 5 feet, yeah.
I mean,
I know you don't want to, but you can, correct?
We can move forward. I don't know that we'll be able to get it approved until we get all the utility companies to the table to approve a new standard for the county. But
okay.
Technically, we could move forward with design.
Okay, all right. Any additional questions for the applicant?
One final question. Steve, do you think it's better that this matter be tabled so that you can really get back with Stacy and you guys work on this particular problem? Because again, you said there are so many elements to this, and I think it's difficult to really make a decision in view of all you said tonight.
I'm happy to talk with Stacy some more about this. The challenge I think that and I understand staff has to recommend denial. I mean, just because there's an ordinance that is written that, it's hard for us to, I guess it's hard to dispute why we can't do it other than what I've tried to communicate tonight. My fear is that the problem is bigger than Stacy and I can solve. I think it's an ordinance. I think it's just a challenge with the ordinance and the applicability of that ordinance to residential projects. And I fear that I'm not the first that's going to come in front of you guys requesting something very similar to this. I can tell you, I've already got another project that I have a feeling will be going through this. We already had one in front of the Board of Commissioners last week to eliminate the requirements. I mean, it's just it's an ordinance problem in my opinion. And I want the county to be nice. And I think that this ordinance is great for certain places where you have development along that corridor, like immediately on that corridor. But when it starts intruding into subdivisions that just happen to access that corridor, and the imposition of those standards applies to that, that's where it really gets cumbersome. So, I mean, I certainly don't want a denial, but I also think that it is a bigger problem to solve than Stacy and I can do by ourselves. And I'm afraid that a delay is just going to really delay it, because I think once Stacy and I get into it, it's going to involve a lot of higher ups.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay.
Yes, I have one question
Okay.
for staff and for Steve. Do you think that you could resolve some of these matters, say with staff and with other county personnel between now and the next time that we have a meeting, and possibly come back where staff might have time to look at the recommendation they have made and perhaps make some alterations, and at the same time maybe suggest some changes to some of our ordinances. I agree this is a very complex situation that some things just don't fit together. And I would like to support Mr. Carmichael and consider what he has suggested on asking for some more time.
I guess that question for you, Stacy.
Yes, I mean, I think that staff has demonstrated that we're quite willing to work with the applicant. If we had additional time, then we could certainly come up with recommendations to change the ordinance, as Mr. Risher had indicated. So yes, I feel like we could move forward in that fashion.
Okay, so Stacy, basically what you're saying, you can allot and administrate. Well, let's move forward with the meeting and we'll discuss this. Any additional questions for the applicant or staff?
I have one more question for Stacy.
Mr. Carmichael, let me take Mr. Venom. He just raised his hand on me. Go ahead, Mr. Venom.
Is this really a problem because it's a conservation district? If it wasn't, if it was in regular, it probably wouldn't be an issue because the setbacks for the houses would be more in that. And I guess either Mr. Moore or Stacy.
So if it's a problem to have a pedestrian light and trees in the front yard, then perhaps increasing the setback would help. So possibly.
Stacy.
Otherwise, I don't know that it would be that much of a problem with the conservation particularly.
Okay. Any additional questions? Mr. Carmichael, you say you had another
Yeah, I
question.
had another question for Stacy. Stacy, I know you indicated that the requirements for the overlay district are a little bit more stringent than for other areas. But with respect to the lighting, is this situation also necessitated by what? This is aesthetics or safety?
It is basically aesthetics because there's going to be safety. There's going to be lights in this subdivision, whether they are street lights or pedestrian lights. The problem is that when the lighting plan was completed for the street lights, the pedestrian lights were not taken into consideration. So either you don't need so many street lights, or perhaps you don't need any street lights at all. But what we have been shown is the pedestrian lights and also the street lights as if the pedestrian lights weren't even there. So there's no reason to have both. And it seems like the problem is actually the street lights and not the pedestrian lights.
Yeah. And also, since the code is silent on the number and the distance of each light, you have the leeway to really work on this lighting situation, don't you?
Yes, sir, that is correct. For the pedestrian lights.
Okay. Any additional questions? Mr. Risher.
Yes, I have a question for Stacy now. Now the actual street lights, that's based on a plan that is prepared by the utility company. In this case, Snapping Shoals, is it not? They would, I think typically the applicant would come before the commissioners to establish a street lighting district, and if that's approved, then they go to Snapping Shoals or Central of Georgia or Georgia Power to actually get the plan for the location of street lights drawn up by their engineers, because I think there's a lot of factors that affect the lighting, like topography and the basic layout of the subdivision and so forth.
Yes, sir. So basically, subdivisions within the overlay district are going to be a new animal.
Okay.
And that was the intent, to hold the developments to a higher standard within this overlay. And so perhaps the utility providers are not used to taking pedestrian lights into consideration, but they very much need to. So perhaps in the area where the internal street crosses a stream or some other place where perhaps there wouldn't be pedestrian lights, perhaps that would be an appropriate place for a street light. But otherwise, the utility providers need to take the pedestrian lights into consideration when they're determining where the street lights should be placed.
Any additional questions?
I do. I have one quick one for Stacy.
Okay.
Stacy, if changing the ordinance to accommodate this case or to work better with this case, changing the ordinance is a challenge, difficult, and time consuming. If this case is tabled to buy extra time for you to work with the applicant, is it possible that working with the applicant and making some adjustments could potentially lead you to an approval of this request? Or do you think that buying extra time would simply lead you to the conclusion that it's necessary to change the ordinance?
So, Ms. King, I think that it is possible that if we had more time, that we could make a recommendation as far as how the ordinance could be changed, which you've indicated, and I believe you're correct, would be more time consuming, but it would be an investment in moving forward. As far as the applicant's request and receiving approval, we're likely to continue to recommend denial of simply eliminating the requirements of the overlay, because the whole purpose of the overlay is to hold the development to a higher standard. What we may end up doing, if we could talk about it, is to talk about the requirement for streetlights themselves. And if it is problematic to bring the utility provider to the table to consider the location of the pedestrian lights before they determine where the street light should go, then perhaps we could recommend an ordinance change to simply eliminate the requirement for the street lights. Because there's going to be lights provided in this subdivision, whether it's pedestrian or whether it's street lights. But the safety is going to be ensured.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff, or if not, I have a comment myself. Okay. First of all, to the board, I don't think we are doing the applicant or the county any justice by waiving it, or by extending this process. I think what we should do is make a decision on whether we're going to allow the lighting and move forward with that. I think the applicant has stated that they can move forward with the sidewalk. So in terms of the lighting, typically on an overlay, the lighting is simply for the basically commercial type areas. It's not generally for a residential area in overlay. However, sometimes residentials are built directly on an overlay on a highway corridor. But in this case, being that it's a residential area leading off of that corridor, I think it can fall upon the residential guidelines. Now, that's how I feel about it. I don't think we're doing any justice by kicking the can down the road.
I would agree.
I think we need to move forward, and in terms of changing the ordinance, but the requirements, I don't think Stacy has that authority to do that. That was done by the overlay committee, and that would have to go back before the committee. I do think so. Am I correct, Stacy?
So, Mr. Chairman, it is true that we have had overlay districts that were studied and prepared by committee. And I believe that the Fairview Road Overlay District is the best example of that. For the highway corridor overlay district, there wasn't a committee. So what we would need to do is to make a recommendation for a change to the ordinance and then go through the process of getting that before the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, all right, all right. Well, if there's no, Mr. Richard, you have additional questions?
Yeah, well, I just have one question or comment is that I was not suggesting that we that we not go forward with some kind of decision on this tonight. But I do think that in the near future, some changes need to be made in the ordinances.
Right.
But that's sometimes that takes months, and I don't think we should, hold these people up, with all the planning and engineering and all the work that they have done. I think that they need a decision one way or the other.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dylan, if I may, just real quick, we've had discussions about possibly changing the ordinance. We do understand there's a conflict, if you will, and you don't necessarily need all those lights inside of a subdivision. So that is something that we have talked about, and we are looking to actually try to modify in the near future. But as of tonight, it's we can't do it tonight, but we have discussed that.
Right, exactly. And like I stated earlier, I think that highway corridor, the lights there are generally for commercial use, and it's a bit different for residential. So I think we just kind of tampering with some things that that we have the authority to kind of change and move forward on. So, but to move forward, do we have any additional questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, if not, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of this case.
Which I don't think we have anybody to speak in opposition tonight.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant or staff?
No.
Okay. I have one quick question for the applicant. Again, Mr. Moore, if you are granted the waiver for the lights or the variance for the lights, do you feel like you can move forward with this process? Again, I asked that question.
Our request was to eliminate the requirements of the highway overlay for the internal streets, which included the landscape strip, the sidewalk, not sidewalk completely, but the 5-foot sidewalk down to the 4-foot sidewalk, and the requirement of pedestrian lights.
Okay.
So if that's what you're asking, yes, we could live with that, but I don't, just the street lights, I think only solves part of the problem.
Okay.
But I mean, just the pedestrian lights, I think solves part of the problem because again, they're all tied together. That's why we had just requested the elimination of those roadway improvement requirements within the subdivision itself. We would still put a sidewalk in, we would still put street lights in, just not the pedestrian lights, and it would be a sidewalk that meets the county's requirements.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. If not, we'd like to call a case, please.
VR 2005, the Reservoir Group LLC of Locust Grove, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 337 East Lake Road in land lots 7 and 8 of the 7th district. The property consists of 41.96 plus or minus acres, and the request is for relief from the Highway Corridor Overlay District standards, and this is District 4.
Okay, we've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I guess I'd like to make a motion, which is difficult to do, but let me take a run at it. I recommend that we deny the applicant's request to eliminate these standards. However, we do approve the reduction in lighting requirements and a reduction in the sidewalk width to 4 feet from 5 feet.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? All right. Let me make sure that motion is clear, Mr. Carmichael. Your motion is to maintain the highway corridor requirements, but eliminating the requirement for the lighting and the sidewalk.
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Richard. All in favor? Please raise your hands.
We got discussion.
It's exactly discussion.
Hey, Stacy, it's Pete Peterson. My question is, I understood you said that you could go with reduction in lighting. That's not a big, giant issue. Is that what I heard you say?
No, not exactly.
Okay,
So since we've got two different lighting requirements, one
Okay.
for pedestrian lighting, one for street lighting, if it's perceived that there's a conflict in the code says that the more stringent requirement will be required. It's the purpose of the overlay district to hold development to a higher standard. So it's our
Okay.
interpretation that the requirement for pedestrian lights is the more stringent standard. So if one of these requirements has to go, we would prefer that it be the street lights and that the pedestrian lights rather would be required.
okay. And then the sidewalk piece. Since those are two conditions that Mr. Carmichael just mentioned, we deny the part about the overlay piece, but we approve the light and then the reduction in the sidewalk. How does that impact?
So if the typical street segment utility placement will still not be able to be followed because of the street trees.
Okay,
The fact that the overlay requires different standards means that the utility placement is going to have to be different. So we continue to recommend that we hold this development to 5-foot wide sidewalks.
okay, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, we have any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Please show of hands, please. We have 1, 2. Okay, motion fails. Okay. Stacy, we're at a lock here. How do we move forward? Because we haven't, or we don't have the motion to deny. So,
The advice that we've been given is that the zoning advisory board needs to take action.
okay.
So what I would recommend is that you would call for another motion.
Okay. Do I have another motion? Okay. Any recommendation? Do I have another motion out there, Mr. Peter, Ms. King? Mr. Richard?
All right, I'll try this. To make a motion to eliminate the street lighting, but require the pedestrian lights, and then have a 4-foot sidewalk instead of the 5-foot.
Okay. Clarify your streetlights, Mr. Richard.
That would be to eliminate the street lights, and instead of street lights, have the lighting facilities made as pedestrian lights as
Okay.
defined in the ordinance.
Okay, and moving the sidewalk to a 4-foot sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Richard, a second by Mr. Carmichael. Any discussion? All in favor? 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, I need a motion to, if no one's moving forward a different, I need a motion to deny. Need someone to give me a motion to deny.
I think we're trying to figure out a way to do this,
Okay.
right?
Well, you've had two options and no one has taken them. So we need to, what are we looking for?
So
All
Matt,
right, let me try another one.
okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Richard.
All right, let's try this. All right, to eliminate the street lighting system and approve the installation of pedestrian lights, and then have a 5-foot wide sidewalk.
All right. Is that the same as the first motion that we had?
That's different.
Okay.
No, it's different.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion?
Okay, my discussion on that is, we're talking about lighting and sidewalk. Are we still denying the portion about
The tree?
the corridor overlay piece? Because Mr. Carmichael, you started off in the beginning, you said denying one portion and then reduction in lighting and reduction in sidewalk. Mr. Richard, you did not address anything about what he denied at first. So are we still discussing that matter?
Yes,
Also,
what my motion is, all right, the applicant is proposing to eliminate the pedestrian lights.
Pedestrian.
What I'm saying is to require the pedestrian light system and eliminate the street lights. And then the second part of the motion would be to stay with the staff's recommendation for a 5-foot sidewalk. So those are the two parts of my motion.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Carmichael. Any further?
Okay, let me do this. Okay, so as I look back at this, the recommendation, the staff said denial of the requested variances for release from the following development standards of the Highway Corridor Overlay District. The elimination of the landscaping and pedestrian lighting requirement. So it says denial of the standards for the Highway Corridor Overlay District. Are we not addressing that? Or are we just addressing those two things that I'm looking at under there? So we're not talking about the Highway Corridor Overlay District part.
Well, those things fall under it, right?
Okay, okay,
Yeah, that's how I would interpret that, yeah.
okay. But the original, like I said, I go back to what the original denial that Mr. Carmichael did. He talked about denying the
Overlay.
stepping away from the standards and keeping it in that. But it seems like if you, if you
do that,
deny
you can't
that,
the others, correct.
then everything under that
It goes with it,
is moot, yeah,
goes with
null
it.
and void.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I think you have to keep in mind that the applicant's original request is to eliminate the standards under the overlay district. And what we're proposing something entire, instead of totally eliminating those requirements, that we will grant a reduction or a change in the lighting requirements. And Mr. Ritchie proposed that we also deny the request for the reduction in the sidewalk.
That's correct.
So if that's not acceptable to the other members of the board, and I think the other members of the board need to offer a motion as to where we should go.
Yeah, because I'm addressing the two recommendations by the staff that are at the end of our report. One dealt with the lighting.
Yeah.
And the other one dealt with the 5-foot sidewalk.
Right. I agree with Mr. Carmichael in terms of the initial motion that we need a different motion if you're not in agreement with it. So at this point, we heard discussion, we have a motion, we have a discussion. Are we clear in terms of Mr. Risher's motion at this point?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Two show of hands. Okay, we still at a standstill with the same motion. Do we have a different motion?
Well, let's try this. I'll make a motion that we reject staff recommendation of denial and give this applicant what he wants, which is elimination of the pedestrian lights, elimination of the street tree requirement, and he wants to go to a 4-foot sidewalk. Let's try that.
Okay. You have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Risher. Okay. I do have one discussion, and you have it, and we're going to move forward with your motion and discussion, but we are, at this point, we're taking the applicant out of the overlay requirements totally. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair.
That seems to be a problem. That
We
seems
have a
to be.
motion.
Oh,
Chair.
yeah.
Stacy?
Okay, so I wouldn't agree with saying that approving the applicant's request eliminates all of the overlay
He's
requirements.
being very specific about, right.
He's being very specific.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the width of the sidewalk, we're talking about pedestrian lights, we're talking about the landscape strip, which includes the street trees.
He
But there
still
are
has
other
to adhere to
requirements.
everything else.
I mean, there are building facade requirements and so forth,
All
so
those
so
stay, right.
it doesn't take him out of the overlay or
Correct.
eliminate all of the requirements.
Okay,
Right.
all right.
He's
Yeah,
these. So let's give him this, I say. I mean, if we're gridlocked on the other, let him have it.
we have a motion and a second. We've had discussion.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
So, Stacy, granting this applicant that, does that mean that anytime somebody else comes and has the same issues, we just have to give them
No,
the keys to the store?
no.
Stacy?
No.
Okay.
No, another applicant would have to make the same request unless the code is changed. The board has listened to the applicant, any unique situation that this particular piece of property might have. It is one of the first, so it may color the way that we look at the ones moving forward, but it doesn't tie the hands of the zoning board.
Okay.
And if I may, Deanna, we're going to need to address this sooner than later. That's evident.
Okay.
It could change.
Yeah.
What we do moving forward. But this is one of those deals where I think we were willing to work with the street light or the lighting piece of it already. I think that was the big issue. I think the issues are the landscape strip and the sidewalk. So, again, this is the first one. So this is where I guess we're cutting our teeth on this one.
I would say we set a precedent, but we're not putting anything into stone. It's not written in stone. We set a precedent, but it's not,
And
you
that
don't have to adhere to it.
Right, but that could be the argument moving forward. So again,
Correct.
we'll need to address this.
Yeah, that's true.
Rather quickly.
All right, just one comment I'd like to make is that the staff, I believe that the staff had said that their preference or if one type of lighting were to be eliminated, I believe Stacy said that that they could support the elimination of the street lighting system as provided by the EMC and require a pedestrian lighting system.
Okay. That's correct. But at this point, we have a motion on the floor and are we continuing with discussion? We have a motion and a second.
What is the motion again? I forgot.
The motion
Yeah.
is to give the applicant basically what he wants.
Okay.
Reduce the width, as he's asking to reduce the width of the sidewalk, we'll tell him he's asking for 4 feet to eliminate the street tree requirement. He asked for elimination of the pedestrian lighting.
Okay.
That's your motion.
And we had a second on that motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? 1, 2. By show of hands, all in favor? 1, 2, 3. Motion carries. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's call the next case, please, Stacy.
So,
Amen. Thank you, guys.
Stacy,
Stacy,
yes,
give me 1 second. Let me get the new applicants.
okay.
Thank you, guys. I know that was tough.
I don't think he's gonna hurt anything.
Well, it's gonna be a cleanup after us.
Okay, so while we're waiting for Karis to bring in the new group, just for clarification, if I could ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Mhm.
All right, so those in favor, I've got District 2, 3, and 4. Were there those who voted in opposition, or are those just abstentions, or what have you?
I'm sorry, were they the ones that voted in opposition?
Right, so I'm showing, and perhaps Karis can help me out as well. Those who voted in favor of the motion to approve were District 2 and District 3 and District 4.
That's correct.
That's correct.
But how many voted in opposition? Or how many
You
would be in opposition?
You had 2 voting in opposition, or that would be Mr. Benham and Mr. Pete.
Okay,
Stacy, we had 2, 3 for both failed motions.
got it. Okay. All right, got it. Are we ready for, to move forward?
John,
Please.
good evening.
I think he's muted, Karis.
John,
I'm here now. Thank
good
you.
evening. Is it just yourself and Mr. Bowen?
That's it. That's correct.
Okay. Yes, we're good.
Okay. BR 2006, Liberty Communities of Stockbridge, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located to the east of Mount Bethel Road in land lot 117 of the 8th district. The property consists of 22.59 plus or minus acres, and the request is for relief from the paved driveway requirement. This is District 3, and the staff report is presented by Kenta Lanham, Planner 1.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, did you have something that you wanted to add?
No, I'm ready for you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Chair and board members. The variance request in front of you is for properties located on east of Mount Bethel Road, as highlighted on the current zoning map in your exhibit books, as well as on the screen. These subject properties are currently zoned R2 and consists of 22.59 plus or minus acres divided among 5 parcels. These 5 parcels are new. These subject properties have recently been replatted. If you are able to see my cursor, the replat on the screen shows the new parcels. That is this parcel, and this parcel, with the parent parcel being this larger parcel. In addition to these 3 parcels, these 2 parcels down here are part of the request. And these are the 2 smaller parcels as part of the request. The applicant's request is for relief from the paved driveway requirement for the R2 properties. The subject property was rezoned from RA to R2 on August 20th, 2019 with 9 conditions. The applicant has since decided to alter the site plan for this area, which previously accommodated for 29 lots, I believe. Rather than developing these parcels as a single family subdivision, the applicant has instead shown the intent to subdivide the land, as shown previously, to accommodate for single family homes on larger lots, similar to those RA properties in the area. I will briefly go back. So again, if you can see my cursor, a single family home on a larger lot, similar to the RA zoning district. I mentioned before that section 20102C requires all driveways to be paved in the R2 zoning district. Section 20102A allows for driveways in the RA zoning district to be unpaved. Rezoning the properties back to the RA zoning district would allow for the driveways to be unpaved as proposed by the applicant. Requesting relief from the paved driveway requirement is not a type of variance that is listed under section 110202 types of variances. Those types are instead limited to dimensional standards such as minimum lot area, minimum lot width, setback requirements, and the like. Staff has evaluated the request and the characteristics of the properties. This includes the types of variances that the applicant can apply for. Given the characteristics of the property in the request, staff recommends denial of the variance request for relief from the paved driveway requirement for the R2 zoned district. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff?
Yes, yes, I have a question. The change in the layout, for this property that is going from, I think, 29 lots to 5. I think what is proposed is more characteristic of something that we would normally see in the RA residential agricultural district rather than R2. Would that be your summation?
Yes, I believe that was the applicant's intent, and staff believes that the larger lots with one single family home on those larger lots is consistent with some of the other RA properties that we see in Henry County, as well as the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay, if there is no additional question, we'd like the applicant to state your name and address for the record, and please come forward. You will be allowed 10 minutes to present the case along with anyone wishing to speak in favor of this.
Certainly do appreciate it. My name is John Palmer, 1611 Avery Drive, Locust Grove, Georgia. I'm with Falcon Design Consultants and represent the landowner. In this case, his name is Bobby Bowen. He's actually on the Zoom call as well. And just wanted to kind of go through how we got to where we are. Back last year, the idea was to rezone the property to an R2 subdivision, which would allow 29 lots. The landowner still lives, has his house still at the property, and he has talked with several builders and gone through some of his cost estimates and has realized that during the current market, he would rather have this developed as just a larger estate lot style subdivision. So what we're doing now is we've gone from smaller lots that are under an acre in size to now we've got a lot that's 8 acres, a lot that's 6 acres, 5 acres, and then 2 of the lots that are just over an acre in size. And so the character of the area went from actually, this works a lot better with the character of the area of Ola, of Bethel, of Mount Bethel Road. And when you do that, when you've got these large lots, you end up with really long driveways. Some of these driveways are more than a quarter of a mile long. And so the idea was, since we're now developing it more as a rural agricultural field, that you don't need, it's not necessary, and it's cost prohibitive to have to go in and build a quarter mile long driveway to get back to it. And it's something that we feel that the residents would probably appreciate this type of development more as well. And just wanted to kind of get your consideration for it. Again, we're excited about the property getting developed in this manner, and would certainly answer any questions that you guys have, and any questions the staff has. We appreciate working with staff. We work with them very well, and we understand the position they're in of having to recommend denial. Myself used to be a staff member for Henry County, so I certainly do understand it and get it. But we want to use some common sense approach with how we're developing this, which would hopefully allow for some flexibility on the driveways to develop it more like it would be out there on Mount Bethel currently.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. Does the board have questions for the applicant?
Yes, sir, I have one. Are all of these lots going to be on the county water system?
Yes, sir.
And could you show me the 2 of the smaller lots? I believe that you said that they would be something slightly over 1 acre.
Sure. So these are the 2 smaller lots here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so these are the 2 smaller lots. They're both over 1 acre in size. But again, the R2 allows for a 30,000 square foot lot, but these are larger than that. So those are the 2 smaller lots. And then these are the larger lots. You can see one of them is 8 acres. One of them is almost 6 acres and almost 6 acres.
Okay, going back to the 2 smaller lots, would how far back would the homes be set, on the building line, on your drawing?
Talking about from the roadway or from the front?
From the right of way of Mount Bethel Road to the front building line, for these 2 lots.
It's about 320 feet.
Okay, so they're set back roughly about 320 feet then, to the proposed building line from the right of way of Mount Bethel Road.
That is correct.
Okay. And then all the others are from 4 to, I guess, roughly 7 acres that are proposed. Is that right?
Well, yeah, almost 6 acres up to just over 8.5 acres.
Okay, what has changed, from the initial idea when it came before this board, for an R2 zoning? And of course, I think there was a limitation that the overall net density would be 1 per acre. But what basically has caused the change from that original plan?
It's a function of economics and the market. The cost of construction to do that subdivision with 29 units was not, cost of construction, as everyone's aware of, has gone up dramatically. And the ability to sell these 30,000 square foot lots with the cost of the construction, you can almost net the same amount of money by doing an estate style subdivision in Ola. You can net about the same profit. So it just didn't make sense, doesn't make sense at the time to do the 29 lots. Not saying that he couldn't do them, but just keeping the character area of the neighborhood that's out there and seeing that the numbers are about the same from an economic standpoint, it just makes more sense for him to do it in this manner.
Okay, well, I remember on that rezoning, there were some concerns brought up by neighbors about the density, but also there was this property is somewhat irregular shape, which may cause some imposition, but what about the topography of this property? Are there any limitations, soil topography or any other geographical situations that might affect the idea of changing from the original plan?
Not as much. We do have a stream here in the back, and we were going to put a detention pond in this area. From a design standpoint, it certainly works. When we did it from an engineering standpoint, it certainly works. I think it just came down to personal preference on the landowner's part. Again, this is his house right here. And so it came down to personal preference and market prices for him to do this layout instead of doing the 29 lots.
Okay.
That's all for now.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Okay, if I don't have any additional questions, I would like to allot the remaining of the time for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. Have about right at 2 minutes. If no one else is speaking in favor, do we have anyone speaking in opposition? Okay. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Stacy, can we bring the screen down? I can't see if everyone wants to vote or what happens. Okay, thank you. All right. If no additional question for the applicants, call the case, please.
Yes, sir. VR 2006, Liberty Communities of Stockbridge, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located to the east of Mount Bethel Road in land lot 117 of the 8th district. The property consists of 22.59 plus or minus acres, and the request is for relief from the paved driveway requirement in District 3.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. I do have a concern about the length of the driveways to reach some of these properties or houses from a public safety standpoint. So I would like to make this motion that for all of the lots, and this would include the two smaller lots that would be set, where houses would be set back 320 feet. My motion is as follows, applying to all of the lots, is that the first 100 feet would be paved. That would be measured from the right of way of Mount Bethel Road. uh, that the width of these driveways, both a gravel section and the paved section, would be sufficiently wide for two-way traffic, 16-foot width minimum. That there should be a concrete apron for each driveway on Mount Bethel Road, which would cover the driveway pipe and ditch, and that driveway pipe diameters would be determined by the Henry County Department of Transportation.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mrs. King. All in favor?
Discussion, right?
Okay. I'm sorry, discussion.
Okay,
Do you
so
have-
what Mr. Risher is saying that he wants to approve it, but with those conditions?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is to approve it with those conditions and other,
Yes, with those conditions.
okay, and I would assume that those are amenable to the,
We're
the
okay
applicant?
with those conditions. Yes,
To
sir.
to staff,
Okay.
well, okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay, motion carries. Okay, did you get that, Karis?
Yes, I got the vote.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's call the next case, please.
Angel G.
Excuse me, Stacy, give me 1 second.
That's good.
Good evening, Priscilla. Do you have anyone joining you tonight for the meeting?
No, it's just me and my mess behind me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Stacy, we're ready.
Okay, thank you. ER 2007, Angel G. Velasquez Rara of McDonough, Georgia, requests a variance from the development standards.
Stacy,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, Priscilla.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Do you have anyone joining you tonight?
No, I do not. It's just me. No, it's just me and my mess behind me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Stacy, we're ready.
It seems like someone is lagging behind.
I think Stacy, isn't it?
It might be.
Kenta, can you call the case?
Yes, give me 1 moment.
okay, I'll go ahead and call it, Stacy. That's VR-2007, Angel G. Is that Vasquez?
Velasquez Guerra.
Velasquez, pronounce your last name?
Velasquez Guerra.
Garrett. Of McDonough, Georgia, request a variance from development standards for property located at 891 Crumley Road in land lot 24 of the 11th district. The property consists of 3.40 plus or minus acres and the request is to reduce the front yard setback, District 4. Who's presenting the case, Stacy?
That would be Kenta Lanham, myself, Planner 1.
Thank you, Mr. Caroline.
Okay. Good evening, once again, Chair and board members. The variance request in front of you is for property located at 891 Crumbly Road, as highlighted on the current zoning map in your exhibit books, as well as on the screen. The property is currently zoned RA, residential agricultural, and consists of 3.4 plus or minus acres. The applicant is proposing to add on to the existing single-family home. The structure is currently set at a 40.4 front yard setback, while the required setback for the RA properties is 75 feet, and that is for the front yard setback. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the front yard setback from the required 75 feet to the current 40.4 feet. I mentioned before that the current home is set at 40.4 feet from the front property line, while the required setback for RA zoned districts is 75 feet. This structure was built in 1866, well before the adoption of any setback requirements. Given this, the structure is a legal non-conforming structure. Section 11.01.03 requires legal non-conforming properties and structures to come into compliance before receiving any addition to the structure. Hence the variance request. Staff has evaluated the request and the characteristics of the property. Given the characteristics of the property and the request, staff recommends approval of the applicant's request to reduce the front yard setback from 75 feet to the current 40.4 feet with the following condition. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff?
Yes. Could you tell us about, I guess, approximately when this home was built? It was quite old, I think.
Yes. That year that is recorded that we have on our tax assessor's website, that year is 1866.
It's pretty old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff?
I have a question.
Okay,
Hampton,
Mr.
what's
Faulkner.
the size of the existing structure on the property?
That is a good question.
23, 30, I believe.
Okay.
The tax assessor's website states that the heated area of the current floor of the current home is 2,387 square feet.
Okay.
And what's the additional square footage they want to add?
I believe the applicant would be able to answer that question.
Okay.
We're trying.
Hold on, Mrs.
Gara.
Gara. Any additional questions for staff? Okay. If with no additional questions for staff, Ms. Gara, we'd like for you to speak forward and give your name and address for the record.
My name is Priscilla Feliciano Guerra. My address is 891 Crumbly Road, McDonough, Georgia 30252.
Okay. Do you have anything you'd like to add to staff recommendation?
Yes, I am. We have 10 children, 2 adult children, which is thus why we have chosen our first property to be so big. And in order to extend this home, it would be illegal for me to do so. So I would have to extend the home past that variance line, which would look very ridiculous from the street side. I don't think that people want to see a home flat in the front and extend it to the side. So that was one of the reasons why we requested that the variance be changed. So that way if we're going to extend it by 10 or 20 feet, it would be, symmetrical.
Okay. All right. Does the board have questions for the applicant?
Yes, I have a couple questions.
Mr. Carmichael, go ahead.
Ms. Guerra, what's the additional square footage you propose to add?
We would like to extend it. I told my husband 20 feet by length at least, but you know, we haven't made exact decisions because we weren't sure if we were even going to be able to do it.
Is there a problem with extending the property to the rear instead of the front?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a well under, I was just told there's a well under here somewhere. I don't know where. I've checked property records and they've given me very brown papers. There isn't a lot of information on the land. So, and I'm not sure if we can even extend it back because of that fact that there may be a well under there, which I'm still trying to find out how to find out about that.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Mr. Richard?
Yes, this dwelling is quite old. Is it on any kind of historical list or any kind of registry?
It could have been, but because of the restrictions, we decided that we weren't going to put it in the historical registry because it was my husband's first home and I didn't want him to be, you know, not be able to put the love in the home, but the entire home needed leveling. It was, the infrastructure was completely, I mean, you would get dizzy if you walked in. So in order for us to keep the integrity of the Historical Home Society, we would have to use this, you know, something similar to the same wooding and, you know, it would just cause so much restrictions on an already large family. So we decided that we weren't going to pursue that route.
Is the proposed addition, is it going to conform with the exterior of the existing home?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's not going to change. We've already changed the color of the home. It's not a rusted red anymore. So now it's a navy blue. But the home itself would still be in the same, you know, it would still be symmetrical. We're not going to change the entirety of it. It would just, the home is built on good bones. It would be silly for us to change that.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? No additional questions? Okay, well, at this point, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Tassan, do you know if we have anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
Not on this case, sir.
Okay.
Correct, Cars?
No, no opposition.
Okay. If no opposition, does the board have additional questions for the applicant or staff? Okay. If not, let's call a case, please.
2007, Angel G. Velasquez Guerra, McDonough, Georgia. Request a variance from development standards.
Stacy, I don't think you're getting through.
I got it.
Okay, thanks, Karis.
VR-20-07, Angel Velasquez Guerra of McDonough, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 891 Crumbly Road in land lot 224 of the 11th district. The property consists of 3.40 plus or minus acres, and the request is to reduce the front yard setback. The property is located in District 4 and was presented by Kenna Lanham, Planner 1.
Okay, we've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
On case VR 20-20-07, I would like to make a recommendation that we approve the applicant's request with the staff recommendation, one recommendation, I think.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Karis, when you're ready, we'd like to call the next case.
Okay, let me move the applicants.
Post the sound.
No, she's moving people around. She's moving people around. She's bringing them in the next app.
Okay, I have admitted everyone into the meeting. Mr. Grant, do you have anyone else? I'm sorry.
No, it'll just be myself.
Okay. All right, Stacy, we're ready.
I'll call it.
Stacy is muted.
Ready for me to call the case?
Yes, please.
He sounds good.
RZ 2001 Mandalay Properties Incorporated of McDonough, Georgia requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural R3 Single Family Residence for property located south of Daily Mill Road, east of Daily Walk in land lot 94 of the 7th District. The property consists of 11.19 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a single-family residential subdivision in District 3. The staff report is presented by Kenta Lanham, Planner 1.
Okay.
Good evening, once again, Chair and board members.
Good evening.
The rezoning request in front of you is for properties located south of Daily Mill Road and east of Daily Walk. The subject properties are highlighted here. This property had recently gone through a lot division, and so these new parcels, these two new parcels, are the parcels part of the rezoning request. The properties are zoned RA as shown in this exhibit map, the current zoning map, with a total of 11.19 plus or minus acres. I mentioned before that the properties are currently zoned RA, residential agricultural. The future land use map designation for these properties is low density residential, allowing for up to 2 dwelling units per net acre. The request is to rezone the subject properties from RA to R3 for the purpose of a single family subdivision with 15 lots. The applicant's request is supported by the future land use map designation of low density residential with a proposed net density of 1.95 dwelling units per net acre. Staff has evaluated the request and several aspects of the site, including the future land use map designation, the current zoning of the surrounding properties, the availability to sewer as described in the water authority letter submitted with the application, and the street classification of Daily Mill Road. Given the aforementioned characteristics of the property, this creates a reasonable basis for granting the rezoning request from RA to R3. As such, Staff recommends approval of the request with the with the 6 conditions shown on the screen. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lanham. Does the board have questions for staff? Okay. If no questions for staff, we'd like the applicant to state your name and address for the record. And you have 10 minutes to present this case and speak in favor.
All right. Good evening, Chairman, board, and staff. My name is Royce Grant, P.O. Box 511, McDonough, Georgia, 30253. I'm here before you tonight requesting rezoning from RA to R3 for 11.19 acres on Daily Mill Road. Daily Mill Road runs between Jonesboro Road and Jodico Road. It kind of runs north and south. Thumbing through staff's report, they've recommended approval. The future land use map is designated as low density residential, and the R3 would fit consistently with that future land use map. I'm seeking to build 15 single family homes on the 11.19 acres, and those homes would be served by sewer. Again, it's consistent with the surrounding area, and I would like to propose one. I'm fine with all the conditions that staff has listed, but I also like to add a 7th condition that we would make the home size a minimum of 2,000 square feet. And that's pretty much it for me, and I appreciate your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Does the board have questions for the applicant?
Yes, just one question of Mr. Grant. I think you indicated just now that the minimum heated area of the homes would be about 2,000 square feet, and I think it's 1,800 square feet for this for this R3 zoning district. Is that the minimum, or would some some be somewhat higher than that, or?
Yes, sir. That would be the base minimum is what we're proposing at 2,000. And I'm sure once the construction begins, we are going to have some homes that are going to be larger. Yes, sir. So I think it'd be safe to say you're going to get a good variety of mix. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm just asking, but would you consider say about 2,200 is the minimum?
I think 2,200 would be fine.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant?
I have one question.
Mr. Carmichael?
What would make side entry garages not feasible?
Topography. If we had to push, one of the houses to the left or right instead of being dead center of the lot, we may have some issues if there's topo on that lot.
Okay.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. If not, we'd like to allot the remaining of the time for anyone wishing to speak in favor. Okay. Karis, do we have anyone else speaking in favor? Or do you know?
No, sir, but we do have one person speaking in opposition. There was another person that we're trying to get back into the meeting.
Okay.
Ms. Trank.
Okay, Ms. Trank. Okay, at this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. That's a total of 10 minutes. So if there's additional people or additional person wanting to speak, you share that 10 minutes.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
I hear you.
For the residents of Daily Walk, my name is Beverly Trank, and I currently own and reside at 71 Daily Walk, McDonough, Georgia, 30253. I've been asked by the resident owners of 61, 6, 85, 28, and 140 Daily Walk to speak on their behalf. Our properties lie just east of 641 Daily Mill Road. All of these properties experience flooding issues during times of heavy rain due to stormwater runoff from Daily Mill Road and Daily Walk running through them. The issue has gotten worse since the church went in across Daily Mill Road. I have video and photo evidence of the stormwater runoff issue if you would like to see it for yourself. We at 71 Daily Walk have suffered property damage. The sheer amount of water that flows through our property has taken down our fence and caused flood damage to the crawl space of our home. We have barely avoided the lower level of our home flooding. Our neighbors at 61 Daily Walk have not been as lucky. Their home has flooded multiple times, resulting in them needing French drains and a sump pump installed to keep their home from flooding regularly. While our two houses take the brunt of the damage from the runoff because it literally runs within feet of our homes and sometimes around our homes, it affects every piece of property west of Daily Walk and east of 641 Daily Mill Road. We can deduce that adding 15 roofs and driveways along with roads and sidewalks will only further compound our problem due to the fact that that property will no longer absorb the water where these things are built. The resident owners at 61, 71, and 85 Daily Walk have all separately reached out to stormwater management over the last several years. Each time they acknowledge the problem, but are unable to offer assistance or a resolution. Since our stormwater runoff problem seems to be unsolvable, we are asking you as the county planners to please not make our problem worse. Building even the number of houses currently allowed by its zoning would put all of the properties lying east of 641 Daily Mill Road in danger of further flooding and damages during times of heavy rain. 15 is far too many, and the residents of Daily Walk are requesting that you deny the zoning change. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on our behalf, and I do have video and photo evidence that I can share with you. This is my first time using Zoom, so I'm not exactly sure how to do that.
Okay. Well, you do have additional time. You have about a little over 6 minutes if you want to.
Here, I can share with you my screen. I'm going to start now. Hopefully. Can you see my screen currently?
Not at this point.
Okay, I'm trying to figure this out for me. Let's see here, Zoom.
Ms. Trank,
Yes.
can you open the item and then share screen?
I'm trying.
I believe we are now viewing your screen and you're scrolling through some of the tabs that
Okay,
you have
here we
open.
go. Here is the video. Mind you, this was never meant for anybody other than friends and family, so I apologize if there's some language. That's a good way. Okay, and so I'm just gonna stop the video there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop the video there. Trying to get back to, there we go. Because you can see there, it's basically, that's what our backyard looks like every time we get heavy rain. And it's not just our backyard, it's the neighbors at 61, it's the neighbors at 85, and all the way down, all the way to the creek, it floods a portion of all of our neighbors' properties. And so we're concerned that building another 15 houses and roads and sidewalks is going to severely compound our issue, because we've noticed that it's gotten worse even since the church has gone in, because the church has this big, large driveway. That driveway funnels the water across the road into 641, and it runs through that property and down the fence line between me and 61. And so literally, it seems like almost every little drop of rain we get in this area comes from the main road and our road and runs through our properties. And it's going to do the same because we are downhill. We run downhill from 641.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Ray?
No, that's my main concern. I mean, almost every neighbor I've spoken with is opposed to a subdivision going in on that piece of property. I've been privileged to speak to at least 10 of the neighbors here. We were kind of short notice, and I haven't been able to speak to the others, but I can't imagine that any of the owners in this neighborhood would be supportive of a subdivision there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. All right. At this time, does the board have questions for the applicant or staff? Additional questions or?
I have a question.
Mr. Carmichael?
Mrs. Trenke, how long have you lived at this location?
We purchased our house in 2008. Technically, we bought it in December of 2007, and we moved in January of 2008.
And you've been experiencing flooding ever since that time?
When we first purchased the property, we were in a drought, so we were unaware of the drainage issues. But ever since we've come out of the drought, yes, we experience flooding issues on our property every time we get significant rain. We get a river through our backyard with any significant amount of rain, and sometimes it is 6-8 feet wide.
And the problem is caused primarily by the creek that's on the property?
Basically, it's a dry creek in dry times. It's like a dry bed in dry times. And when it rains, we get a very raging, as you saw in the video, creek that runs through our property. And it runs from Daily Mill Road behind all of the properties that are west of Daily Walk and east of 641. It runs on the backside of all the properties from Daily Mill Road all the way down to Walnut Creek.
Okay. Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant or staff?
Yes, I have a question for staff. It appears from some of the county maps that I'm looking at that really this drainage area goes through many subdivisions.
Mr. Richard, let me just say, for some reason your sound has changed. Can you help us out with that?
Is he on speakerphone?
I think that there is a lot of upstream development that's probably contributing to this problem. I don't think that this one particular subdivision would, but I think that there's a lot of drainage that comes from I-75 in this direction. I think it's a tributary to Walnut Creek.
Mr. Richard, we can barely hear you at this point.
Is your phone on speaker? Put it up. You might have taken it off speaker. Put it back on speaker.
Just give me a minute.
Okay. While he's working on that, go ahead. Does any other board members have questions for the applicant or staff?
I have a question for the applicant.
Okay.
I want to ask if he has met with the residents in that area.
No, sir, I have not. I did talk with the neighbors, Ken and Catherine Glenn. I have spoke with them. They own the 4.04 acres adjoining it, but that's the only neighbors that I've spoke to.
Okay. Well, I have a question for staff. Now, staff, based on the number of properties that he's, or the structures that he's building, will it require a retainer pond?
Mr. Chair, let me just say that since a residential development is being proposed, that the development will have to meet all development standards, and that would include appropriate stormwater detention facilities.
Okay. So,
Could you hear me now?
we hear you now, yes.
Yep.
All right, I'm just going to say, I guess just to repeat what Stacy said, there is considerable upstream drainage. And I think that the stormwater department would have to look at that in conjunction with our staff. But I don't think that this one subdivision would necessarily add significantly, to the problem, especially if there was on-site detention as mentioned by staff.
Okay. I have a question for Mr. Grant. Have your architects took a look at this and decided if you're going to need a retainer pond or not?
Yes, sir. It definitely will need a retention pond. And what my engineers looked at is there's currently a pond that's an existing pond that's on the property. And we would do some slight modifications and retrofit that would take care of the water management facilities.
What does that say? What does that say?
Any additional questions for the applicant or staff? Okay, if there's no additional question, we'd like to call the case, please.
RZ 2001, Mandalay Properties Incorporated of McDonough, Georgia, requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to R3 Single Family Resident for property located south of Daily Mill Road, east of Daily Walk, in land lot 94 of the 7th District. The property consists of 11.19 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a single-family residential subdivision in District 3.
Okay, we've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the rezoning request to R3 with the 6 conditions described by staff, and with the 7th addition that the minimum heated floor area for the homes would be 2,200 square feet.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mrs. King. Any discussion? Okay, no discussion. All in favor? Need a show of hands of all in favor. 1, 2, 3.
Can they see your hand?
Okay, motion carries.
Go by separate.
Carries, were you able to get that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, when you're ready for the next case, we're ready.
Okay.
No, I can't hear them.
She's moving people around. so.
Good evening, Mr. Douglas.
Yes, ma'am.
I was told that you had multiple people wanting to join.
Correct.
Do you know how many people? I have Sharon Okadua.
Yes, so there's going to be 10 additional people.
Okay.
I don't have all their last names necessarily.
Okay. So this might be everyone waiting. I think there's 11 people waiting in the room.
Okay, perfect. That was me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Miss Benez. How are you doing today?
I am well. I've been on
Good.
hold for over 2 hours.
Right. It's been a while.
Yes. Are you the?
So I can only see you right now. Can you see anybody else?
I can only see you. That's it.
Okay, we'll see what they're doing.
Say that again.
I said, well, I guess we'll just see what they're doing. They
Oh, yeah. I've been waiting to see what was gonna happen. I don't see anyone on Zoom. Anyone else is supposed to be on?
Good evening. This is Dan Richardson. I am on, but I don't see, I see myself now.
Okay.
Hi, this is Daphne. I'm on. Sharon Dakota on.
Denise Galante, I'm on.
Claudette Duante, I'm on.
Okay, we'll see what they're doing.
Say that again?
I said, well, I guess we'll just see what they're doing.
So, yeah, I've been waiting to see what was gonna happen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, I'm going to mute everyone. If everyone will remain muted.
Anyone
The
else?
Please wait until the chairman acknowledges you before speaking.
I am on, but I don't see, I see myself now.
Karis, are you ready?
Can you hear?
Sharon Dakota on.
Yes, I can hear you, Karis. Can you? Are you ready?
Hey, Karis, can you hear DeLander?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
No, I was asking her, Karis, could she hear you? Go ahead and put the master mute on and let DeLander start. Or whatever.
Okay.
Okay, DeLander, you can go ahead and proceed.
Okay. Stacey, you want to go ahead and call this case? He's muted. Case number RZ-20-02, Dr. Mayo Health Investment LLC of Monterey Park, California, requests a rezoning from C2 General Commercial to O1 Office Industrial for property located at 931 Rock Prairie Road in Land Lot 4 of District 12. The property consists of 1.736 plus or minus acres, and the request is for an assisted living hospice care facility, District 4. Karis,
Good
who's
evening, Mr. Chair.
presenting?
Board members, are you able to hear me well enough?
Yes.
Very good. So the request before you tonight is for a vacant hospice care facility on Rock Quarry Road. This facility was zoned C2 back in 1996, and it received conditional use approval in 2006 for a care home with several conditions. One of the conditions was that if that business ever left, that the conditional use approval would expire. So when that business left, the conditional use approval for hospice care expired. However, the building was built for the purpose of hospice care, and the applicant would like to have a hospice care facility on the subject property again, in addition to assisted living. The future land use map calls for industrial land uses, but the applicant's request for office institutional, which would allow the hospice care facility, is supported by a future land use map designation for industrial. As is requesting no changes to the building, they simply would like to reopen the hospice care and to also provide assisted living services. Staff has evaluated the applicant's request, and we recommend approval of the applicant's request to rezone from C2 to OI with 8 conditions, which mirror the original 9, but without the condition with the sunset. I'd be pleased to answer questions.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff?
Stacy, I have a question.
Mr. Carmichael.
Stacy, you indicated that part of the applicant's request is that a part of the facility would be used as an assisted living facility?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, how many patients or clients do they anticipate?
Mr. Carmichael, that would be a better question for the applicant. I don't know that, but what I understand is that the building would not be modified.
Okay.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay. If there is no additional questions for staff, we'd like the applicant to state your name and address for the record. You have 10 minutes to present the case, and that's a 10-minute total for anyone wishing to speak in favor of the case. That's total. If anyone wishes to speak in favor, you guys have 10 minutes to present this case.
My name is Brian Douglas with Land Engineering, and I'm representing the property owner, Dr. Miles Health Investment, just as the agent to the owner. And the business owner that's going to actually be running the facility that's leasing the property is Miss Denise, and I'm sorry I don't have her last name in front of me. So she will be able to answer more specifics really regarding the day-to-day use of the building, and I'm just here to kind of facilitate. There's some language barriers with the property owner, so I'm just here to facilitate with those sort of things.
Okay. All right. Does the board have questions for Mr. Douglas? Mr. Carmichael, you had a question earlier. Do you have questions for Mr. Douglas?
Well, if he can answer what type of clients they anticipate serving at that location.
Right. When we open it up to the floor, Miss Denise, she's gonna be the day-to-day business owner, and she'll be able to answer that.
Okay.
I would be able to speak more on just property specific things that are kind of set forth in those previous stipulations.
Okay. Mrs. King. You're muted, Mrs. King. Karis, can you unmute Ms. King,
There,
please?
I got it. I got it
Okay,
now.
thank you.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Does the applicant know why the original assisted living facility went out of business or closed?
I do not know that, no, ma'am.
Do you know how long ago that was?
I believe it was around November of last year. I could not.
Oh, last
say
year.
that very specifically. Yes, ma'am.
But last year. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Douglas? Okay. If there is no additional question, we have approximately 8 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case.
Yeah, so first I'd like to put on Miss Donise if she's available.
Okay.
I'm available.
We're not sure who you are, so if you will raise your hand, and Karen, if you will unmute that person, please. Okay, Karis, do you see her?
Yes, she can go
Okay.
ahead.
Go ahead.
My name is Denise Davante. The property is in 931 Rock Quarry Road. So I would like to come in front of the board to ask for favor to rezoning the property so we can help the senior citizen in Stockbridge or Henry County to welcome them to the community, to have a place to stay they can call home. And I don't make any change in the property. The property have 12 rooms on it, and we will try to apply between 18 and 22 clients. Some of them will be private room and some of them will be sharing room. So we can serve the community to any senior citizen who need help with assisted living.
Okay. Anyone else? If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. Karen can, okay. Karis, do you see her?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hello, hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Kodamar, and I am a nurse at Piedmont Henry Hospital. I've been working there for 18 years, and I'm here in favor of the facility being accessible to the community. I find that it's a good need for the hospital. Ms. Donise Durant has been very helpful in placing patients in the community when we have difficult discharge barriers. And I think it would be advantageous for the community to have this facility open to help the hospital and the surrounding area. There's limited resources available. From my experience, we've had difficulties with placing patients, and this will be a good thing for the hospital and the community. Thank you.
Okay. Karis, I'll let you take them. Do you see the hands?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. We need your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Daphne Williams. I'm with Brightmore Hospice. I'm speaking in favor of the Rock Quarry property for Miss Donise. I've been working in hospice for many years and working as the community rep for Henry County and Clayton County.
when that building Vitas did close, it made it very hard and difficult for a lot of the Henry County patients and families that needed that service, that inpatient setting. It made it, really difficult for them to receive services and be displaced. It's one thing for a family member already going through issues with their health, but to be displaced from their home and have to go to another town for inpatient services. We've been having to send our patients to Fayetteville or to Griffin, just for them to have inpatient hospice and other needs. So I am in favor of the facility being open because I believe it would be a great opportunity for Henry County to allow their own hometown people to, finish their course of life at home. Thank you.
Okay. Karen,
Miss English is next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Constance English. My address is 128 Chestnut Street, Cedartown, Georgia, 30125. Like the two ladies that spoke before me, I'm in favor of this organization being able to be rezoned on the Rock Quarry address. As previously stated, it is greatly needed. I have worked in case management at Southern Regional for the last 4 years. I went to Wellstar Atlanta Medical Center as well as Wellstar South Fulton. The needs meant not just for end of life care, but also for seniors and people that have needs of care that the family cannot provide. It's very great. Donice is able to provide this in a loving manner, and also it goes back to the community. We're not going to talk about the taxes and the benefit that the county itself will get, but let's talk about how the people will gain themselves. Given what's going on right now with COVID-19, Donice has still continued to house people that no one else would even place. She's taken in residents from skilled nursing facilities, as well as from other hospices and other assisted livings that were not able to return back to their initial homes. I feel that it is needed, and I feel that you should approve it, and I feel that you should do that exponentially. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We have 3 minutes left.
Karis, I believe you have Mrs. Richardson next, I believe.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Dan Richardson. I reside at 105 Stratmore Place here in Stockbridge, Georgia. I am speaking in favor of the rezoning. I resided in Henry County for 25 plus years. Many of my family members are directly involved with healthcare. As a result, I have firsthand knowledge that we need in Henry County quality assisted living and hospice care. Both of these services would be provided and support the citizens' needs and our growing population. I ask that you approve the request as recommended by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There's about 1.5 minutes. Miss Brandy Pinckney, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brandy Pinckney, and I also live in Henry County. I just wanted to say I'm a family nurse practitioner in the local area, and everything that everyone has said is true. I have seen Henry County grow from Henry General to Henry Medical Center now to Piedmont Henry. Our population is growing, and with the COVID-19, we have a great need because some people don't have caregivers. So Donice and Loving Care is willing to take on some of those people who just don't have anyone because of the recent loss. So not only the history of the county, some of the recent things that's going on also proves the need for this facility. Thank you.
Yeah. How much time we have, Karis?
Chairman, that is our time.
Okay, that's our time. Okay. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant or staff?
No.
I have a question for Stacy.
Okay, go ahead.
Stacy, if we allow the rezoning from C2 to OI, what are some of the other permitted uses of that facility under the new zoning?
Okay, Mr. Carmichael, as far as other uses in OI, it would be limited to office uses such as real estate or bank, even medical offices, and then the institutional part would cover the hospice, assisted living, and so forth. What this rezoning will accomplish is to eliminate the possibility of there being any sort of retail or restaurant or some other type of use that would be more appropriate for a commercial zoning district.
Is there some reason we did not make as one of the conditions, indicate that this would be limited to hospice / assisted living only?
Right, so we as staff did not recommend a condition that would limit this to any particular type of care home. The reason, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
I hear you, but there's a voice problem.
Okay, bear with me just a moment, please.
Okay.
Okay, Stacy, you can go ahead.
Okay. Tucson is letting me use his computer, so I apologize for the problem. But we didn't want to recommend that there be a condition that would limit this to any particular type of institutional use. That's something that was done back in 2006, because at the time, we didn't have supplemental standards that were particular to hospice care or to assisted living or any other type of institutional living. So it was important, since the conditional use was technically for care home, which could include a lot, that we actually stipulate at that time what type of care home that we were talking about. But in this case, we didn't want to do that. But if it's the pleasure of the zoning advisory board to do that, please make that part of your motion.
Okay, and also finally, under this new proposed zone rezoning, would they be allowed to treat individuals with alcohol and drug problems?
No, sir. No, sir. The definition of assisted living and hospice care would not allow for the treatment of drug and alcohol dependency. The code would not allow that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any additional questions for staff or the applicant?
No.
Okay. If not, we'd like to call the case, please.
RZ 2002, Dr. Miles Health Investment LLC of Monterey Park, California, requests a rezoning from C2 General Commercial to O&I Office Institutional for property located at 931 Rock Quarry Road in Land Lot 4 of the 12th District. The property consists of 1.736 plus or minus acres, and the request is for an assisted living and hospice care facility in District 2. The case was presented by Stacy Jordan Rudisil, Chief Planner.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion with regards to case RZ-20-02. I propose that we accept the applicant's request with an added condition number 9 that I wrote it down, please. That this shall be for the purpose of a hospice / assisted living facility only.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second by Mr. Risher. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor? Where you at, Ms. King? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the cases for today. Have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank everyone for joining us this evening, and continue to be safe.
Have a great night. Thanks.
Uh,
Get